I still remember the sound the machine made, that sharp little beep-beep that somehow echoed louder than the music in that stupid rooftop restaurant. The waiter tried to smile as he slid the sleek black card back across the table, but even he couldn't hide the fact that he'd just witnessed something unbelievable. The Triplet Alpha Billionaire's card had been declined. I swear for a second, time froze. Arden was the first to snatch the card back, jaw tightening like he'd just been personally insulted. Blaze leaned in, whispering something under his breath, probably blaming Arden because that's what those three did. Blame each other for everything. And Caspian, well, Caspian just laughed that fake little laugh he used whenever he was seconds away from losing his mind. Meanwhile, I just sat there feeling like the ground under me had tilted. Not because I cared about the money. Rich people have their embarrassing moments too, but because of what the moment symbolized. Those three had always operated like the world bent around them. If they wanted something, it appeared. If they broke something, it got replaced. If they messed up, someone else paid the price. But that night, that tiny beep was the first real crack I'd ever seen in their armor. Arden tried the card again, and again, and when the waiter cleared his throat, you'd think the man had threatened their lives. Blaze's eyes flashed that dangerous glint I'd seen too many times, the one that made me shrink a little in my seat. Caspian kept insisting it had to be a glitch because we're good for it, like the restaurant should somehow take that as payment. I felt the embarrassment crawl up my neck, turning my face hot. People were looking, whispering. A few even recognized the triplets, they always got recognized, and phones were already sneaking up for pictures. It wasn't the spectacle I minded, it was the tension radiating off the men I was with. I'd learned the hard way that their anger didn't stay contained for long. Arden turned to me, forcing a calm voice he clearly didn't feel. It's fine. We'll handle it. Just stay put. But there was something in the way he said it, like I was a child who couldn't possibly understand adult problems, that made something twist sharply inside me. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and looked down at my hands, feeling that old, familiar shame I'd spent years trying to shake. The waiter backed away, murmuring that he'd give us a moment, and the minute he was gone, Blaze hissed, "Check the account." Caspian was already pulling out his phone, fingers trembling just slightly. Arden rubbed the back of his neck, turning red, then pale, then red again. I shouldn't have been there. I knew that. The three of them could go from charming to volatile in seconds, and money. Their money was the one thing they couldn't handle losing control over. And yet somehow I kept letting myself get pulled back into their orbit. But this time, something really was different. I could feel it in the air. The machine beeped, the card failed, and deep inside me, something shifted, something I didn't have a name for yet. And while the triplets fell apart in front of me, scrambling to protect their precious image, I had no idea that someone else at the table, my quiet little Pookie, was watching the whole thing with a very different expression, almost like he'd been waiting for this moment. I didn't even notice Pookie had gotten up until I saw the corner of his hoodie sleeve brush past me. He'd been sitting so quietly the whole night, half hidden behind that mop of hair he refuses to cut, that I honestly forgot he was even there. He always did that, folded himself small so he wouldn't take up space the triplets might claim. But when he stood, the whole table shifted. "Pookie," I whispered, grabbing for his wrist, but he gently pulled away. Not rude, not abrupt, just firm. Firmer than I'd ever felt from him. The triplets were still staring at Caspian's phone, arguing under their breath when Pookie cleared his throat. It wasn't loud, but the sound cut through them like a blade. All three heads snapped up, irritation flashing in their eyes. They hated being interrupted, especially by my kid they never took seriously. Pookie didn't flinch. He just looked at the waiter who had been hovering a few feet away, trying to pretend he wasn't watching a public meltdown with billionaires in the starring roles. "We'll take the bill," Pookie said. He didn't even look at the triplets. He spoke to the waiter directly, in this calm, steady voice I barely recognized. Arden blinked. "What are you doing?" Pookie ignored him, actually ignored him, and reached into the pocket of his hoodie. And I swear my heart almost stopped because I thought he was about to do something embarrassing, something impulsive, something a kid would do. But then he pulled out his card. A simple navy blue debit card, the kind you get from a regular bank, nothing fancy. It looked almost small in his hand, and yet, the way he held it, it was like he was holding a weapon. The waiter hesitated, eyes flicking between Pookie and the triplets like he was trying to figure out which one would cause him less trouble. "Sweetheart," I whispered. You don't have to. I know, Pookie said softly. I want to. And the second he said that, something inside me twisted. Guilt, pride, confusion all tangled together, because I had never heard him say something like that with so much certainty. Caspian scoffed. Kid, that bill is more than you think. Just sit down. Pookie slid the card toward the waiter without breaking eye contact with Caspian. Run it. That moment felt unreal. The waiter took the card like he expected it to explode. Blaze muttered something like, "This is ridiculous," and tried to stand up, but Pookie said, "Sit down," so quietly, and with such strange authority, that Blaze actually froze. The waiter walked away, and all I could hear was the pounding of my own heartbeat. Auden finally leaned in toward Pookie, voice low and sharp. "Are you trying to embarrass us?" And Pookie, my shy, gentle Pookie, looked him dead in the eye and said, "You're doing that on your own." For a second, none of us breathed. I didn't even know where he'd learned to talk like that. It was like he'd grown 5 years in 5 seconds. The triplets didn't know how to respond. They weren't used to someone challenging them, especially not someone they didn't consider a threat. When the waiter came back holding the little receipt tray, he looked stunned. "Approved," he said. "Approved." Pookie just nodded like he expected nothing else. Auden's mouth actually fell open. Blaze leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing. Caspian stared at Pookie the way someone might stare at a puzzle missing a few pieces. I reached for my son's hand under the table, and he let me hold it. But he didn't look at me. He kept watching the triplets like he was waiting for something, preparing for something, and that's when it hit me. Pookie didn't just step in to help. He stepped in because he knew something the triplets didn't. I barely slept that night. Even after we left the restaurant and the triplets stormed off in 3 different directions, each pretending they weren't rattled, my mind kept circling the same thing. Where did Pookie get that kind of money? He walked beside me on the way home, quiet as always, but there was something new about his silence. It wasn't the timid, shrinking kind he used to slip into whenever the triplets were around. This was controlled, intentional, like he was choosing what not to say. When we got inside our apartment, he headed straight for his room, but I stepped in front of him and blocked the doorway. "Pookie," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You need to tell me what's going on." He kept his eyes on the floor. "It's nothing, Mom. They were embarrassing you." I fixed it. Fixed it with what? My voice cracked, and I hated how desperate it sounded. That bill was more than my rent. I know my kid doesn't just magically have that kind of money. He flinched. Not much, but enough. And that's when I realized I'd been wrong earlier. He didn't look older or tougher, he looked tired. Bone deep tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. "Please," I whispered. "Look at me." Slowly, he did. And for a heartbeat, he wasn't the quiet kid hiding in his hoodie. He was someone holding back a storm. "I didn't want you to worry," he said. "That's not an answer." He hesitated. I could see him deciding whether to lie, and that scared me more than anything. Finally, he sighed and walked into his room. I followed, my chest tight, and watched as he pulled a small metal lockbox from under his bed. I instantly recognized it. It was my dad's old safe, the one we used to keep passports and spare keys in. When he opened it, my breath stopped. Stacks, neat, thick stacks of cash, a few envelopes, a black notebook, and a flash drive. "Pookie," I whispered, my voice barely there. "What?" "It's mine," he said quickly. "All of it. I earned it." "Earned it how?" The panic slipped out before I could stop it. "Pookie, if you're involved in something." "I'm not selling drugs or anything," he snapped, louder than I'd ever heard him speak. Then he softened. "Sorry, I knew you'd think that." I sat on the edge of his bed, waiting, terrified of whatever came next. He pulled the notebook out and set it in my lap. It was filled with pages of numbers, charts, messy scribbles I couldn't make sense of. "I've been trading," he said. "Crypto, stocks, arbitrage, mostly crypto." I blinked, stunned. "Since when?" "Since I was 13. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. 13? He'd barely been able to tie his shoelaces without losing focus at that age. He kept talking, words spilling now that the dam had cracked. "I used to use your old laptop. I watched videos, read forums, joined these online groups. I got good at it. Really good. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd freak out." I felt like I'd swallowed a brick. "Pookie, why would you hide something like this from me?" His eyes dropped. Because you were with them. He didn't have to explain who them was, and I knew they'd try to use me, or worse. The truth of that hit hard. Too hard. And the money? I asked quietly. How much are we talking about? He swallowed. Enough. Pookie. He met my eyes again, and there was something cold behind his calm. Something protective. Something dangerous. They think they're untouchable, he said. But they're not. I've been watching them, Mom. I know things about their companies they don't think anyone sees. A chill ran through me. Pookie didn't just have money. He had leverage. And he'd been waiting, watching, for the exact moment to use it. The next morning, the triplets showed up at my door like they owned the building. They always did that, strolled in loud and confident, taking up all the air in the hallway, but that morning, something was off. Their swagger looked strained, like they were trying to glue it together long enough to get answers. Arden knocked once sharply. Blaze didn't bother knocking at all. He just pushed the door open when I cracked it. Caspian followed behind them with that irritated little twist in his mouth he got whenever something didn't go his way. Where's the kid? Blaze demanded before I could even say hello. My stomach tightened. Good morning to you too. This isn't funny, Arden snapped. Last night was a mess, I said. Embarrassing? A reality check? Pick one. He glared. But I didn't care. After seeing Pookie step up the way he had, I wasn't scared of the triplets in the same way anymore. Something in me had shifted too. Caspian paced the living room like a caged animal. We need to talk to him. That bill was paid, I interrupted. That's what it was. Blaze scoffed. You think we're letting some kid show us up like that? He knew exactly what he was doing. I paused. Because they weren't wrong. But I wasn't about to hand them my son on a platter. Pookie stepped out from the hallway before I could respond. Hoodie on, hands in his pockets. Calm. Too calm. The triplets turned toward him like wolves scenting something unfamiliar. Not prey, but something that made them uneasy. Arden crossed his arms. That little stunt last night wasn't a stunt, Pookie said. No hesitation. Your card got declined. I paid. End of story. Blaze took a step closer, towering over him. Don't play smart. Where'd you get that kind of money? Pookie didn't blink. Why? You need some? Blaze's jaw twitched. Arden muttered, watch it, under his breath. Caspian stopped pacing, staring at Pookie like he was trying to read a language he'd never seen before. Then Pookie reached into his pocket. I almost said his name, almost begged him not to do whatever he was about to do, but he pulled out something simple, a single sheet of folded paper. He handed it to Caspian first. You should read that. Caspian opened it, and the moment his eyes scanned the page, the color drained from his face. What is this? He whispered. Arden snatched it from his hand, scanned it, and swore under his breath. Blaze looked over Arden's shoulder, then turned slowly toward Pookie, his expression shifting from anger to something much closer to fear. I stepped closer. What did he give you? Arden let out a humorless laugh. Financial records. Caspian's voice cracked. Not just ours, the holding company, the shell accounts, stuff no outsider should be able to see. Stuff we didn't even know was being tracked. My heart dropped. Pookie just shrugged. I pay attention. Blaze stepped back like he needed distance. How long have you had this? A while. You're blackmailing us, Arden hissed. No, Pookie said, completely steady. I'm letting you know that if you ever try to use my mom again, for money, for status, for whatever game you three think you're playing, I will protect her. That's it. The room went silent. The triplets, these men who always moved like a unit, suddenly looked small, human. Their shine wasn't just dull, it was peeling off in flakes. Caspian finally whispered, How much do you want? Pookie shook his head. You still don't get it. I felt my throat tighten, because he was right. They didn't understand. Not at all. This wasn't about money. It was about power. And for the first time since meeting the triplets, I realized my son had more of it than all three of them combined. After the triplets left that morning, stiff, quiet, and pretending they weren't shaken, the apartment felt different. Too still, too heavy, like their egos had left dents in the air that hadn't quite smoothed out yet. Pookie stood by the window, arms folded tight across his chest. He looked like he was staring at something far away, but I could tell he was listening for their footsteps, waiting to hear how long it took before they regrouped and decided they weren't done with us. I didn't even know where to start. Pookie, What you did, I know. His voice was flat, controlled. You're mad. No, I said quickly. I'm scared. He turned then, and something in his face softened for just a moment, that familiar gentleness surfacing through the armor he'd built overnight. You don't have to be scared of them anymore, he said. I'm not scared of them, I said. I'm scared of what this means, of what you're getting pulled into. He looked down at his hands. I've been in it a long time, Mom. You just didn't see it. There it was again, that tiredness I didn't know how to soothe. Before I could answer, a knock hit the door again, harder this time, 2 quick pounds, then 3 slower ones, a rhythm I'd heard 100 times. Blaze. Pookie didn't move, but I saw his jaw tighten, so I opened the door myself, squeezing my body into the gap like it could shield him somehow. Blaze didn't bother hiding his frustration. We're not done talking. I think you are, I said. He pushed past me, again. He'd done that so many times before, but this time Pookie stepped between us and stopped him with one hand pressed against Blaze's chest. Just one hand. And Blaze froze like he'd hit a wall. Don't touch my mom, Pookie said quietly. Blaze looked down at Pookie's hand, then up at Pookie's eyes, and I swear I watched a man realize he wasn't the most dangerous person in the room. Arden and Caspian slipped in behind him. Arden shut the door, pacing again, running his hands through his hair. Caspian's voice came out thinner than usual. Look, nobody's threatening your mom. We just need clarity. Clarity? Pookie echoed, almost amused. Arden stopped pacing and spun toward him. We need to know what you plan to do with that information. Pookie didn't answer. He just walked past them, sat on the arm of the couch, and looked at them like someone assessing how fragile something really is. I plan, he said slowly, to keep things balanced. Blaze muttered. What does that even mean? It means if you step on her, you step on me. If you lie to her, you lie to me. If you use her, I use you. Caspian winced like the words physically hit him. Is this a threat? Arden asked. No, Pookie said. It's a boundary. Blaze laughed once, sharp, disbelieving. Kid, you don't draw boundaries with people like us. Pookie leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I already did. The silence that followed wasn't the explosive kind I'd gotten used to with the triplets. It was worse. It was the silence of men realizing they no longer had control, of power shifting without their permission. Caspian finally spoke up. What do you want us to do? Pookie didn't hesitate. Leave, for now. Think about how you talk to her. Think about why you're even here. Then decide if you can treat her like a person instead of something you own. They looked at me then. Really looked. Maybe for the first time. Arden nodded stiffly. Blaze swallowed hard, the muscle in his jaw jumping. Caspian murmured something like, all right, but it sounded more like surrender, and then they left. The door clicked shut behind them, and the apartment felt lighter and heavier, all at once. Pookie exhaled slowly and rubbed his face with both hands. They're not going to take that well, he said. I know. He looked at me then, really looked, and I realized he wasn't fearless. He was bracing himself. Mom, he said quietly, they're going to make you choose, sooner than you think. And the worst part was, I already knew he was right. The triplets didn't stay quiet for long. I knew they wouldn't. Men like them don't let things go. They rearrange the world until they feel powerful again. And sure enough, 3 days after Pookie drew his line, they decided to draw theirs. Arden was the one who called. He always tried to sound reasonable when he was about to do something awful. We need to talk, he said. All of us. Tonight. I didn't want to go. Every part of me was screaming not to. But I also knew if I didn't face them, they'd come to the apartment again, and Pookie didn't deserve that kind of pressure. So I went. They chose the penthouse lounge of one of their hotels, a gleaming cold room filled with glass and chrome, beautiful in that expensive, empty way that always made me feel like I didn't belong. The 3 of them were already there, seated in a perfect row like a panel of judges waiting to hand down a sentence. Arden stood when I walked in. Blaze didn't. Caspian didn't even pretend. Thanks for coming, Arden said, gesturing for me to sit. I didn't have a choice, I said. I didn't bother softening it. Blaze leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Let's just get to it. I braced myself, waiting for threats, for anger, for the arrogance I'd come to expect. Instead, Caspian spoke first. We can't keep doing this with your son. My stomach twisted. Doing what? Being monitored, he said. Being held at gunpoint, basically. Arden shot him a look but didn't disagree. Blaze exhaled slowly. We care about you. We do. But him? He's a problem. The room chilled. I kept my voice steady. He protected me. Because you never did. Arden flinched. Blaze stood up and paced, jaw tight. Caspian rubbed his temples. Then Arden said it, the thing I think they'd practiced beforehand. You can't have both. Us. Or him. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. Blaze added, we're not saying cut him off. Just keep him out of our business. Away from us. Away from anything that affects our companies or our reputations. And if I don't? I asked. Caspian looked up at me quietly. Then we walk. I almost laughed. The sheer irony of it. The triplets, who once made me feel small, intimidated, grateful, acting like their absence would be a punishment. But before I could answer, Arden stepped closer and dropped his voice. You know what we can offer you. Stability. Security. A future. I felt something twist in my chest, something old, something that had once been a need. They'd given me attention when I was lonely, protection when I felt lost, a place in their glittering, messy world. I'd mistaken that for love. But then I pictured Pookie standing in our apartment doorway, one hand on Blaze's chest, saying, "Don't touch my mom," like it came from his soul. I pictured the metal lockbox, the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he'd carried alone. You're asking me to choose, I said softly. Arden nodded. Blaze crossed his arms like he already knew the answer he wanted. Caspian held his breath. I stood up. This isn't a choice, I said. He's my son. Caspian flinched first. Blaze opened his mouth, then shut it. Arden looked at the floor like the rug had just been ripped out from underneath him. You can walk, I said. All three of you. I'll survive. For a long moment, nobody moved. The triplets, these men who ruled boardrooms and entire industries, didn't know what to do when someone wasn't afraid of losing them. Finally, Arden cleared his throat. You're making a mistake. You already made it, I said. I walked out. None of them followed. On the elevator ride down, my hands shook, not from fear, but from relief that felt like grief. I wasn't just losing them. I was losing the version of myself who thought I needed them. When I got home, Pookie was sitting on the couch pretending not to be waiting up. He didn't ask what happened. He just looked at me and said, "You chose." And I realized then I wasn't afraid of the triplets anymore. I was afraid of what Pookie was about to do next. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked through the door. Pookie was sitting on the floor with his laptop open, but he wasn't really looking at it. He was staring through the screen, fingers hovering above the keys like he was waiting for permission from some darker part of himself. Pookie, I said softly. Talk to me. He didn't look up. They didn't take it well, did they? No, I said. But I don't care. I meant what I said. You come first. His jaw tightened the tiniest bit, like he'd been bracing for a different answer. Then he nudged the laptop toward me. I have everything, he said. Every shell company, every offshore account, their secret partnerships, the lawsuit they buried last year, and the board, votes they manipulated. All of it. My stomach dropped. This was no small stash of leverage anymore. This was enough to burn down empires. Pookie, I whispered. What were you going to do? He swallowed. They hurt you. For years. They made you think you needed them. They took advantage of you when you were vulnerable. And last night, seeing them look at you like you were disposable. He shook his head. I can't let that slide. My chest tightened. So what? You were going to ruin them? He didn't answer, and that silence scared me more than anything the triplets had ever done. I sank down beside him. Listen to me. I'm angry too. I am. But destroying people, it doesn't undo the damage they caused. It doesn't fix us. He finally looked at me then. Really looked, and I saw it. Rage, yes. But under it, fear. Fear that if he didn't strike first, they'd come for us again. Fear he'd carried since he was 13, watching me get swallowed by people who didn't value me. I'm not letting them hurt you again, he said. I won't. I know, I said, but you don't have to become them to beat them. His eyes softened just a fraction. I reached out and closed the laptop. He let me. Pookie, the power you have, it's real and dangerous. And it came from you being smarter than the world ever gave you credit for. But think about what you want your life to look like 10 years from now. Do you want to be someone who destroys or someone who protects? He was quiet a long time, then he leaned his forehead against my shoulder, breathing shakily. I was so mad, he said. I didn't even recognize myself. I did, I said. You're my kid. You feel deeply. Too deeply sometimes. But you're good. Don't lose that. His arms came up around me, something he hadn't done in years, and I held him like I used to when he was small and scared of thunderstorms. Eventually, he pulled back and whispered, "So what do we do now?" "We move on," I said, "and we let them deal with their own messes without our help." He nodded slowly. Later that night, while he slept, I walked into his room and saw the lockbox sitting open on the desk, the stacks of money, the notebook, the flash drive full of secrets that could topple titans. I didn't touch any of it, but I realized something. The triplets were right about one thing. My life had changed, not because of them, because of the boy asleep in the next room, quiet, brilliant, protective and terrifying in a way I was strangely proud of. He could have burned their world down. He chose not to. And that choice said more about him than any revenge ever could. In the end, the Triplet Billionaires taught me one truth. Power reveals character. And my little Pookie, his character didn't just protect me, it saved us both.